Good evening, everyone. This September 14th, 2021 special meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now called to order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Buck.
Here.
Councilors Nguyen.
Here.
Wendland.
Here.
Burdick. Here. Rapp.
Here.
Boop.
Here.
And Mans. Here.
Now will everyone please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. So we are conducting a hybrid meeting tonight as well, so we have folks that will be present here on the Zoom. We're here for one purpose this evening, and that is to conduct a public hearing on a comprehensive plan map, zoning map, and text amendments for the Boones Ferry Road construction staging site. And we will start by having Mr. Luce, the city attorney, read us the hearing procedures.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The hearing before the Council tonight is pursuant to Code Section 50.07.003.4.G.III, with a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission. The Council shall review the recommendation pursuant to Lake Oswego Code 50.07.003.7.F through O. And pursuant to the code, the Council's review is limited to the record created before the Planning Commission. Only persons who have testified either orally or in writing before the Planning Commission may testify before the Council. No issue may be raised before the City Council that was not previously raised before the Planning Commission. Pursuant to the code, the Mayor has modified the time limits to those testifying orally to 10 minutes for the applicant, 5 minutes for recognized neighborhood associations, 3 minutes for individuals, and a 5-minute rebuttal. The applicant shall proceed with the testimony, followed by those in favor, those against, ending with the rebuttal. Now is the time for any council members to identify any potential bias, conflict of interest, or ex parte contact outside of what is already on the record.
No.
No.
Mr. Mayor, hand it back to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We are now ready for the applicant's presentation. We'll ask Planning Director, Mr. Siegel, to come forward. And we have Frank Angelo as well. Welcome to you both. So as Mr. Luce said, you'll have 10 minutes for presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Buck, members of council. Is this on?
No.
Test?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to bring up our presentation here just a moment, please. Okay, thank you, Mayor Buck, members of the City Council, Scott Siegel, Planning and Building Services Director, and as the Mayor said, Frank Angelo is here with Angelo Planning. He and his team have been assisting the city with this application. And he may call on other team members if the council has questions that we can direct to them. This evening, we're here to present the application, as the mayor said, for amendments to the comprehensive plan, map, zoning map, and community development code to implement the council's direction to explore the possibility of permitting multifamily affordable housing at the Boones Ferry Road construction staging area. This is a quasi-judicial application in that it's specific to a small set of properties within the Westlake Grove Design District. This map and aerial show the location of the property. As you're familiar with the Boones Ferry Road construction staging site, it's a little bit under 1.5 acres at the southwest corner of West Sunset Drive and Boones Ferry Road. The area went through a community planning process in the late 1990s that resulted in the Westlake Grove Design District and the associated zoning for that. The city has updated its comprehensive plan since then, most recently in 2013, and we'll be discussing that in a moment. The property is within the Lake Forest Neighborhood Association, and the Neighborhood Association has an adopted neighborhood plan for the area. This photograph shows the Boones Ferry Road construction staging site off to the left behind the existing medical office building at Sunset Crossing. So this is at the intersection of West Sunset Drive and Boones Ferry Road, where TriMet has a bus stop. This photograph is of existing townhomes that are immediately to the west of the site, just opposite the property on West Sunset Drive. And by way of background, the council initiated this process and requested that staff prepare an application for amendments to allow multifamily housing on the site to meet a specific housing need in the community. The city has an adopted comprehensive plan and housing needs analysis that describes what those needs are, and it's based on population, employment, and demographic forecasts that have been coordinated with Metro and were adopted as part of the 2013 comprehensive plan. The city acquired the property in 2018 for the construction staging site, and the intent is to sell the property upon completion of the project, which is anticipated later this year. A public involvement process would precede any solicitation for development proposals on the property, and any development application would be subject to the development review process under the Community Development Code and would come before the Development Review Commission. As I said, there is an identified housing need in the community for low-income households, including families, and the affordability criteria the city's adopted are targeting families who are earning at or below 80% of the area median income. That's how you've defined affordability, where a household spending not more than 30% of their income on housing. And this equates to approximately $74,000 for a family of 4 in the year 2020. And to just make that real, that would be a Lake Oswego firefighter, for example, or a household with an entry-level teacher and a partner earning minimum wage. So these are folks who live in our community and work in the community and are not able to afford housing. The property, to put it in context, the West Lake Grove Design District is one of 5 neighborhood village centers that was designated through the 2013 comprehensive plan update. And those neighborhood village centers are areas where higher density housing is specifically desired or envisioned in combination with community services, commercial uses, and civic opportunities. Other areas where higher density housing is envisioned include our 2 town centers, Lake Grove Village Center and downtown, and the employment districts, which include the Southwest Employment Area, the Cruiseway Corridor, and Merrillhurst. As the council may recall, the city recently amended the code to allow multifamily affordable housing at the Merrillhurst campus, and the owners of that campus are initiating a housing project. The applicable review criteria are contained in the comprehensive plan, the Lake Forest Neighborhood Plan, the Community Development Code, Metro Functional Plan, and statewide planning goals and administrative rules. We've addressed those. The Planning Commission found that all of those criteria were met. They voted and adopted their findings on August 23rd, 6-0. They approved the findings. And so with that, I'm going to hand it to Mr. Angelo to present the proposal.
Thank you, Scott. Again, Frank Angelo. The PowerPoint doesn't appear to be advancing here, so
Just click that.
well, on the screen.
Oh.
So, okay. So the proposed amendments before you tonight, they're really threefold. First is a zone change in the comprehensive plan map amendment to unify the zoning within the sub-area under the Westlake Grove Office Commercial Zone. The second action would be to provide code amendments that would allow multifamily residential uses in the sub-area of Westlake Grove, the Westlake Grove Office Commercial Zone. Those residential uses are not currently allowed in the Westlake Grove Office Commercial District. And then finally, an amendment to the development code to allow an additional 5 feet of height from 35 feet to 45 feet for multifamily development within the sub-area when that development is at least 80 feet away from all our 7.5 zones. The sub-area zoning itself is shown on this zoning. Are you getting, is it coming through for you? It is, okay. The current zoning is what's in front of you today. As you can see, there are 6 tax lots. 3 of the tax lots have split zoning on them. This action before you tonight will unify the sub-area, the zoning within the sub-area, and make it all Westlake Grove office commercial. At the same time, as a part of the application, we conducted a design study, and that design study was intended to understand the feasibility of fitting up to 50 units per of multifamily affordable housing on the site.
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
Can we
I
just
apologize.
pause real quick? Can we maybe like restart so we can see the slides? I don't know if there's a.
Yeah, we need some technical assistance here.
Okay.
That's okay. I don't know.
Thanks, Carrie.
So it's advancing on
Let's see if
here.
it go. It won't go though. It's not, I have to use that. I can just click on the slides, the individual
Okay.
slides.
All
Yeah.
right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Should I go back and show the zoning maps, or did you see those? You saw those, okay. So I was talking about the design study that was conducted to understand.
Oh, wait, could you show the maps, please? Thank you.
Show the, okay. It's not coming up. We have some technical difficulty here, I apologize, I don't know. What should we do, keep going? Okay. It almost fails reboot. We're not hooked, we're not connected here. Oh, there we are.
go.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. Let me just go back very quickly. The current zoning, nope. There it is. Proposed zoning, as I said, would unify the sub-area with the Westlake Grove Office Commercial Zone. The design study, which is still not moving, I'm sorry. The design study, again, we looked at the site and validated the site assumptions in terms of parking, open space, access, and compliance with the Westlake Grove Design District standards. This is not intended as a development proposal. It's really an illustration of a fit plan, what can fit on the site, could this use fit on the site, and how would it arrange? Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. This is the outcome of the design study. It shows the layout, a potential layout of a three building multifamily development with 50 to 54 units and 68 parking spaces. The site plan and the next slide that will show an elevation comply with the Westlake Grove design standards, with the exception of the need for an additional 5 feet of height, building height. Next slide, please. Key issues from the Planning Commission included the traffic and traffic impacts. The application itself submitted a traffic assessment as a part of the application that complied with the state transportation planning rules and the city comprehensive plan and development code requirements for the traffic impact statement.
I've added time back, but you have 1 minute left.
Thank you very much. I'm almost done. The traffic analysis looked at a reasonable worst-case scenario under existing versus proposed zoning to demonstrate compliance with the state transportation planning rule. And as Scott said, any future development on the site would be required to do a traffic impact statement for the specific use proposed. Next slide, please. The other three issues, parking, as I mentioned, the design study did demonstrate that we could comply with the city's parking requirements for the use. Condition of West Sunset Drive was an issue that was raised by a number of neighbors in the area. Any future development of the site, regardless if it's multifamily, office, or whatever, would be required to identify impacts and mitigate those impacts as a part of a development. And then finally, location for housing. The site is considered development ready, and the Planning Commission found that no alternative location already zoned was available that could reasonably meet the affordable housing need. And then the final slide, thank you. The Planning Commission recommendation, the Planning Commission did conduct 2 public hearings and then held 2 meetings for deliberation. And they received extensive comments, public comments, both in favor and in opposition to the proposal. On August 23rd, the Commission voted 6-0 to recommend that the City Council approve this ordinance based on the applicable review criteria. And the applicant tonight requests that the City Council adopt the Planning Commission recommendation for approval.
All right.
Thank you, and I apologize for the technical difficulties.
Thank you for working through them. So now we'll have questions from the council related to the presentation. We'll start with a question from Councilor Mans.
Yes, I don't know how difficult this will be, but could you please go back to the existing condos that are there?
Yeah, that's like slide 2. Those?
Yes, and then if you wouldn't mind fast forwarding to the rendering of what is more or less being proposed.
But there,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. And final question, is everything west of Boones Ferry off of Sunset unincorporated Clackamas, or is there a hodgepodge of,
Councilor Mans, there's a mix, a checkerboard of incorporated and unincorporated properties, including both those along West Sunset
Okay.
and properties along Boones Ferry Road.
sorry, hodgepodge is a technical word. Thank you. That was all of my questions.
Councilor Burdick.
I guess, could you explain a little more about the need for the 5-foot increase in height and the impact of maybe how that relates to zones next to this one?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Burdick. That's a very good question, because that really goes to the heart of the design study and why we did that analysis. As the council's intent, as I understood, the direction was to work within the framework of the Westlake Grove Design District and not to attain height or building mass that would be more akin to the village center or the downtown. So there is a transition that exists there today, and the intent was to maintain that transition. What we found was that the aspirational target that the memorandum of understanding between the city, Clackamas County, and Metro had looked at a prospective project of up to 50 units, or approximately 50 units. When we modeled that, what we found when we applied the Westlake Grove Design District standards, specifically those related to buildings design and roof pitch, we found that it wasn't feasible to create the footprint that the study generated and still meet the roof pitch standard within 35 feet. Because of that, the floor plate on a multifamily building is typically going to be broader, at least in a development that's combining units on a site like what we were asked to study. It's a broader footprint than what a townhome building would have, for example. So when you begin to apply that 512 roof pitch, you end up, really going more than 35 feet. So that's why it was proposed. Why it was proposed at 40 and not any more than that, although we did hear from some of the housing providers or developers that more would be better. We said, no, we really would like to keep this within the scale of the village center and the Westlake Grove Design District. And at 40 feet, we felt that it was an appropriate transition, provided that that additional 5-foot increment of height was set back at least 80 feet from low-density residential zones. And at 40 feet, it's less than the 45-foot height allowance in the Lake Grove Village Center, and it's less than the 45-foot height allowance in the office commercial zones that exist elsewhere in the city. And it would have to fit within a pitched roof form of architecture, whereas in the Lake Grove Village Center, you could get to 45 feet with a flat roof. So that's why we modeled 40 feet and recommended that setback that we did.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Wynn.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Siegel. I had a question about the public engagement process. I know that during this initial discussion right now, you're just asking us as council to, approve the zone change, the code amendments, and the development code amendments. But after this, so obviously we're not approving any sort of development, but you mentioned, I think one of the slides, that there's going to be additional public engagement. Can you talk a little bit about that, so that, just from my understanding, is that this is not the only opportunity the public is going to be able to have their input, right?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Wynn. And that is our intent, discussing our approach and in consultation with, the city manager. There's a lot more work that would, remains to be done before there can actually be a housing development come out of the ground there. And on one level, there's the memorandum of understanding between the city, Metro, and Clackamas County. This property or prospective project would need to be in Clackamas County's queue if we collectively were wanting to apply Metro housing bond funds, for example. And there's a public involvement process that would happen around that. The city offering this property for sale, preparing a development solicitation or a request for development proposals. Those terms would be established by you as the council. You would decide. The zoning may allow what it allows, what we've modeled, what we've studied, but ultimately it's up to you what terms you put in place. And so our recommendation as the city would be to conduct public engagement around that. What are the values that are important to future development on this site, considering the community need for housing, the neighborhood compatibility and relationship to neighbors. Those are all important, I think, criteria in a public engagement process that would follow this initial zoning decision.
Mm-hmm. So the numbers we saw, they're like 50 units and 68 parking spaces. Those are just aspirational. Those are, yes. We could approve less, right? We could not approve any of them, right?
Yeah,
at this point.
There are two stops along the way, or off-ramps, I suppose. One would be that development solicitation, and you define the terms for that. And you would want to do that in consultation with our regional partners to determine what makes a viable housing development for the community that we're trying to serve. The second test, I suppose, which is more of a quasi-judicial process, would be when a development application is prepared and presented to the Development Review Commission. Our obligation was to look at, for lack of a better word, a worst-case scenario. If you're going to change the zoning, you've got to consider what the impact will be from that on traffic, on potential infrastructure impacts on the community. And so that's what we've done. It really is a worst case in terms of what the holding capacity of that site might be. It could be more, it could be less, but we think that that's a reasonable worst case scenario.
Thank you.
Councilor Winland.
So I just want to make clear that we're adding this housing onto the development possibilities. Somebody could still buy the lot and put commercial or anything else that's allowed. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's correct, Councilor Wendland. And when this came before the council for a decision on the MOU and whether you wanted to initiate this process at all, that was one of the directions that we heard. Clearly, it was we're adding options and possibilities for this site. It's not subtracting any uses that are currently permitted.
and then I have a question. I don't know whether City Attorney Luce or City Manager Bennett would know this, or you, if we sell that lot, if and when, the money goes back to the district, do we have a fiduciary responsibility to take the highest bidder? So if somebody came in and said, we want to give you $8 million for the lot to build a mini Disneyland, no? We can take-
Could be a matter of council policy, but it's not required by either your district plan or any of your existing adopted policies or any laws.
So we could take the lowest bid and be okay.
Well, you could decide that there's a public purpose that you want to fulfill and that requires you to receive less in cash. That's really a council policy discussion that you all need to have with one another.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Mans?
Thank you. I'm trying to look at my map, and the largest park that I see in the area is, looks like West Waluga or Waluga. Are there any pocket parks or smaller parks within that vicinity? Or, I'm just thinking, I've read a lot of comments about folks who are worried about children not having a place to play, what with Boones Ferry right there. So I'm just not 100% up on all of the little parks around there. I'm thinking of a Free Ponds or a Evergreen or something like that. Do you know offhand, or would that be something more that Director Anderholm could answer for me?
Yeah, that's a good question, Councilor Mans, and we may have a dimension or a distance. I think that did come up at the Planning Commission, and I want to say it was a quarter or a third of a mile, maybe it was,
Okay.
anyway, I don't want to add anything new to the
No.
record, but that was considered by the Planning Commission, and so the closest park is West Waluga Park as a community
As
park.
a large community.
As a larger park, and then
Right,
of course up
right.
Boones Ferry Road, Lake Grove Elementary has open space. This property, if it were developed with multifamily housing, would be required to provide 20% of the site in open space.
Of open space,
And that-
okay.
That would be the same for any multifamily development. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, thank you for that. I know it's a little obscure, but thank you.
Mr. Siegel, could you talk about the, so we're aware of the need for workforce housing in the community that you articulated. What role does that play in this application? If we didn't have that need, what would the consequence be in regards to this land use application?
Mayor Buck, let me make sure I understand. So if we did not have that need identified in
If
our
there was no
comprehensive
housing
plan-
need,
Yeah, well, that's really the crux of any zoning amendment or comprehensive plan amendment decision is there a public need for the proposed change? And so without that, there's no real purpose in changing the zoning. And the comprehensive plan is designed to be for amendments, adaptive management. The land use planning chapter of the comp plan has a whole series of policies that tell us how to evaluate these types of requests. So we did hear quite a bit, the Planning Commission heard quite a bit from interested members of the public about the Westlake Grove Design District Plan. A lot of community input, a lot of thought went into that. Why would we consider changing that? There's a public need, community needs have changed. There's a demonstrated need, there's a regional need for housing. And so that's one of the factors that must be considered. We also have to consider, are there reasonable alternatives, properties that are already zoned and that would allow the housing that's needed here. And what we found, what the Planning Commission found, was that there really is not. So,
right?
yeah.
Thank you. West Sunset, is that Lake Oswego or county road?
It's checkerboard.
Oh, it is.
I think. Well, the road right-of-way itself, that's a good question. I may ask our city engineering staff to respond to that if you'd like.
Sure. Well, would we be making improvements along West Sunset a developer be making roadway improvements along West Sunset, along the frontage?
Yeah, so future development of the property, whether it's for a multifamily community or commercial, office commercial, the level of development that the zoning allows would likely trigger street improvements, frontage improvements. The street that fronts the property is typically required to be upgraded with development. Now, depending on the impact of the development, sometimes the city exacts improvements that go beyond that, but without an actual development application, I wouldn't be able to speculate on that.
And what are some provisions of the code that work to mitigate the traffic impacts of developments like this?
Yeah, the development review procedures in the Community Development Code, LOC 50.07, I think 03, somewhere in there.
I have that memorized.
There are two places. One is a section that requires traffic impact studies for developments that generate, I think it's 25 or more peak hour trips. Again, our traffic engineer, Will Farley, could address that. And that tells us that we need to study, and we need to look at the impacts and explore them in ways that are different than what the zoning application was required to do. Because you have an actual development application, they look at how many trips are generated, where they're distributed, what the capacity is, what the safety and operational needs are. And then the conditioning authority, which is also in the Community Development Code in the same chapter, subsection, I think, gives the city, whether it's the DRC or staff, if it's a minor development, authority to impose conditions or exactions. For example, improving the street, paving the street, putting in curb gutter, sidewalk, or pathways, bike lanes, depending on what the transportation plan says must go there. So there's both the requirement and the obligation of the applicant to study and coordination with the city, identify, what is the impact, what are the facility needs, what does the transportation system plan say should be done, and then to mitigate, to make those improvements as a condition of development.
Okay, and what is the difference between a traffic impact study and a traffic analysis?
That is going deeper than my expertise.
And maybe Mr. Farley has an answer
Yeah,
on
Mr. Farley can answer your question.
the
I'm
West
sure he
Sunset
can.
too.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilor. Will Farley, City's Traffic Engineer. It's called many things, a traffic impact study, traffic impact analysis, transportation impact study. They're all pretty much synonymous with each other. They are a study that looks at a specific development or sometimes a zoning change, evaluates the amount of trips that it's going to be generating, looks at existing conditions, a theoretical year of build out, and then what those impacts would be in that theoretical year of build out. So it identifies off-site improvements that are needed to support the development, any safety improvements. There's usually a safety analysis involved that looks at pedestrians, other infrastructure improvements that are needed.
Okay, so, and as I just want to make sure I understand correctly, in this case, the lots are commercially zoned and allow uses more intense than the use being proposed to be added on. So as a result, that was the level of analysis that was done, since the use is less intense than uses already allowed. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then
Right
further
now,
studies will be done with a particular application.
right now it is a high-level analysis that looks as here's the intensity that can be done now versus here's what the intensity could be with the proposed change. Since there is not a significant impact to the system with that change, it is concluding that our transportation system plan, our comprehensive plan, the findings are still valid. And then when a development is proposed, they will hone in on the impacts of that specific development and look at those.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Farley. Councilor Rapp.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to jumble up this question, so bear with me, Mr. Siegel, and maybe it's a question for city manager or city attorney. If right now the property is zoned for commercial and office space, and we're talking tonight about making it multifamily, regardless of what we decide tonight, so if we do approve it or don't approve it, would that preclude the city from accepting a private party offer on the property at any point going forward?
Short answer is no, Councilor Rapp. The land use decision has no effect on the city's ability to control the property.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Mans.
So with that, I always think of it as the A-boy ruling that we can only do so much, or I'm sorry, we can only compel the developer to do so much within the scope of the work done. How does this work? And this may be way too long of an answer or a question. How does this work when we have county, city, multiple jurisdictions? Are they going to, those in Clackamas County, will they appeal to Clackamas County? Do they have different rules and regulations for what can and can't be done? I know ours are pretty strident as far as roads and so on and so forth. So I'm just a little bit curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Councilor Mann. So I think what you're getting at is what is the city's span of control for
Thank you.
exacting these improvements or requiring mitigation
Yes.
on a road, for example, that's in Clackamas County, it's not in the city, or a stretch of the road that may be partly in the city and part of it is out. And so through the development review process, the city coordinates with Clackamas County. And so the county may be a service provider. There may be, water might be provided by a water district that's under the auspices of the county rather than the city government, as an example. Or the roadway. The county may be the roadway authority, but the land use that's proposed is on a property that is in the city. So we coordinate with Clackamas County. In other parts of the city, we would coordinate with ODOT if there's a state highway that they're needing to access. And so our code accommodates all of those potential, that whole constellation of impacts and ownership of facilities that is out there. And our responsibility, or the development review process responsibility, is to make sure that we've identified the impacts, regardless of who owns the facility, and that those impacts are mitigated to meet the standards in our code.
Great. Thank you for articulating what I always have a little bit of a problem getting out, Director Siegel, so thank you.
No, you were there. Hey, boy, I heard it. That's proportionality.
It's my buzzword.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to, thank you. Thank you so much. So we're going to now open the public hearing, and as Mr. Luce said at the outset, just recall that this is an on-the-record hearing, so keep your comments to things that are already on the record. Please do not introduce new information, new exhibits or whatnot in your testimony. As I also mentioned, this is a hybrid meeting, so some folks are here to testify in person, and then we have others joining us via Zoom. So we are going to first hear from folks who are testifying in favor, and then folks who are testifying against this application. Following testimony, there will then be a 5-minute rebuttal period from the applicant. Everyone testifying has 3 minutes to do so. So first up, someone joining us by Zoom, we have Mr. Don Wayne. And Ms. Linder will bring him.
Hello, and
Hello.
good evening. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Don Wayne. I live at 1491 Coalwood Drive in the Palisades District. I spoke with the Planning Commission on this question in support of this proposal. My focus here is going to be a little different. I want to talk about the term infrastructure. And I was very glad to hear Scott Siegel in his presentation make reference to some of the points that I will refer to. When you as public officials who are involved directly in making public policy, share with officials like yourself all over the country now, in thinking about this question of infrastructure, that's a word that has appeared frequently in the media. Nationally, we do need to engage in a rebuilding of our infrastructure. But when we think of infrastructure, we tend to think about it in terms of buildings, bridges, roads, railways, technologies of many kinds, but not necessarily of people. And in this particular case, the issue of affordable housing, I think, refers directly, as Scott Siegel implied, to the possibilities for essential public servants in a community. I think that all of the first responders, firemen, police, paramedics, our teachers, librarians, and also the people who would be actually involved in the maintenance of the kinds of constructions and facilities that we are in the process of developing, will benefit from affordable housing. But it'll also be a benefit to the rest of us, because there's plenty of research that has shown that public employees are better able to serve the communities in which they work if they have the option for them and their families to live there themselves. So as I say, I think that the possibility of affordable housing is a great investment for Lake Oswego and its future. Another facet of affordable housing I think that it's important to consider is the possible benefit to see senior citizens like myself living in Lake Oswego who've lived here for a long time and may find it difficult for them to be able to remain because of increased rent costs or increased costs of maintenance and taxes on homes they own. So another reason that I think all of our citizens will benefit from a program like this. I'm about out of my time, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I should have mentioned before, if there's anyone here who would like to testify, please fill out a slip at the back of the room and bring it forward to Ms. Linder. We will also acknowledge that all of the comments that people wrote during the Planning Commission hearing are a part of the record, and we have had a chance to review all of those. Also, subsequent to the Planning Commission hearings, we received additional written testimony. Those are also a part of the record, and while we're not hearing them audibly tonight, we have also read those. Okay, so next we'll move to in-person testimony here, and first up is Jamie Housley. Welcome.
Evening, and just for the record, I'm in opposition.
Wonderful.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Council. For the record, Jamie Housley, attorney with Jordan Remus here in Lake Oswego on behalf of Renaissance Ventures LLC, which owns and operates the property and office building in the West Lake Grove Design District. It's a mouthful. This application converts prohibited multifamily use into an allowed use and breaks a successful redevelopment pattern simply because the city owns the piece of property and would like to promote multifamily housing. The city should rather create a new housing where the land is already zoned for such and can use the proceeds of a sale of this property to facilitate that. Simply changing the zoning to suit itself violates comprehensive plan policy number A2C, which is to avoid negative impacts to surrounding properties. And I go into detailed description in my June 14th letter about that. First of all, multifamily projects are notoriously underparked. The Planning Commission found no negative impacts on parking without explaining why. Reciprocal parking agreements are pretty common in the office and commercial setting, but in my experience doing this for many, many decades now, there is no such thing for a family use for multiple use parking arrangements. This would further hinder the continued development of commercial uses, which is an adverse impact on the surrounding commercial properties within the design district. Furthermore, policy B1 promotes shared access, parking, and pedestrian facilities with other businesses. Many non-office uses, including all types of residentials, are prohibited in this zone simply because they detract from the success of the office district as a whole. Jamming residential into the middle of an office district violates this policy for sharing private facility among businesses. The proposal similarly conflicts with the city's policies on economic vitality reflected in policy A2 to maximize the use of employment land, and then in policy B1 to provide development in employment zones. The Planning Commission found residential redevelopment promotes these policies, which neglects the imbalance of housing and jobs in the city, and wrongly assumes that there are no inverse impacts on displacing employment and employment land. Finally, this came after the hearing, but I do want the council to take note of Senate Bill 8, which was passed by the legislature and signed by Governor Brown on June 23rd, which effectively allows affordable housing projects to be located in office and commercial zones, therefore negating really the reason to have this in the first place. You don't need to have a rezone in accordance with this new state law. And I do think it's prudent on you guys to take a pause and look at what the effects of that may be and whether or not this rezone is actually needed because of that. With that, I'll
Thank
time
you.
is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Council members, if you ever have any questions, just hit your light and we'll call you after the persons. But if I don't see any, I won't ask. Okay. Oh, did you have a question?
I do.
Oh, Councilor Vance. Thank you.
I am not 100% versed in the order that Governor Brown signed. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I'm not 1,000% sure myself, but it's called Senate Bill number 8. It was it's a state law.
Right.
And it amends ORS 197-830, ORS 197-850, ORS 197-779, and ORS 227-508. It does a variety of things in the affordable housing arena, and one of the things that it does is to try to incentivize affordable housing on leftover church land or office or commercial zoning areas, and it puts limitations on local governments, both county and cities, from putting different conditions on housing development. And so basically, in some sense, it opens up a lot more potential land for the affordable housing products.
Great. Thank you. Although, as you know, we have very little leftover land in Lake Oswego, but I appreciate that exclamation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions on that?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Randy Sebastian. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Randy Sebastian, 16771 Boones Ferry Road. This, the way I understand it, and hopefully you guys do too, we're talking about 5 affordable apartments, not 55, but 5. Only 10% of this project can be affordable. The rest can be as unaffordable as the Woodward, only 5. The land, I submitted an offer, as I said I would, for $2.5 million, which is more than the city paid, which is $41 a foot. The city could go to, say, for example, industrial land down in foothills and spend $18 a foot and get twice as much land for the same amount of money. Also, I did something a few years ago for Catholic Charities on 68th and Powell. I built a 6-plex. I built it for no profit or I just built it at cost. And it turned out great. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And I am offering, if the city would sell me the property for $2.5 million, we take that $2.5 million, all of us, and buy a piece of property. It can be done, say in First Edition or someplace that would be better than living on the corner of Boones Ferry and Sunset. And an 8-plex can be built with parking, and the city would own it free and clear. And hire a management company to run it, and that way it gets done. You're not dealing with all these confusing, you know, what's the county do, what's the state do, metro funds. This can get done, like now. If you want affordable housing now, you can get 8 units in a more desirable area, better place for people to live, than 5. Again, you're looking at 5 units here, not 55, but 5, as far as the affordables. And again, talking about what we could build, in 8-plex, they're 900-foot units, 2 bedrooms, they're nice. And again, the city could set the rent, the city can control it. I know the city may or may not want to be in the affordable housing business, but you can hire a management company to do it, and it could be built anywhere in the city. And as my attorney said, the city, you can with the new tool that the state has given you, you can put affordable housing anywhere. A church, there's churches around. There's less desirable. As you know, Portland, a lot of businesses are moving to Lake Oswego. Cruiseway is full, 100% full. Our buildings are full. We need more office space in Lake Oswego. Affordable housing is needed, but I believe that people get caught up in looking at this large project and they have stars in their eyes. It's not all affordable. 5 of the 55 are. 5.
Thank you, Mr. Sebastian. We have a question from Councilor Mbu.
Yes.
Sir, thank you for coming. I have a problem because some point I was in the housing, in the planning committee, and the planning department explained that it's 50 to 55 units. What make you say that it's only 5 units?
Thank you for asking. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If the planning commission can also clarify from 55 to 5. And I have another question. Thank you.
The way I understand it, and the way I believe, if people read it correctly, there are 55 units being built, apartments. Only 5 of them are under rent control, or 10% rather. 10% can be rent controlled, that the city can require the developer. So a developer is going in to build, they always build the minimum amount, which is 10% for affordables.
Well, not if it's an affordable housing developer building an affordable housing development.
We don't know. We don't know who.
That's why we have the MOU with the county and Metro, because that's the kind of project we're looking at building.
Okay.
Just to be clear.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why.
I know
yeah.
what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, because the MOU we have with the county is very clear, and you know that it's affordable
So
housing. And
you're talking 100, you guys are saying it's 100% affordable.
Yes.
The developer can't set rents. They're all based on the 80% of the revenue, of the income.
Yes.
Of the income of
Well,
somebody.
there's no development application, but that's the vision.
So you guys would require 100% all affordable.
Well, these are the units being built with Metro Housing Bond dollars. Metro Housing Bond dollars are not being used to build market rate housing, because that's not the purpose of that program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my other question, Mr. Sebastian, is I would take you on your offer. If we find another place, this place will stay, but in the future, if we find another place, would you be willing to build?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I've done it before, and I'm in the housing business. I'm the largest builder. I think affordable housing is great. I've done it on 68th and Powell. You can drive by today. It's beautiful. So, yeah, I'm for affordable housing in a spot that's a nice place to live. As I said in the planning commission, I don't know where the kids are going to play. It's a parking lot. It's a busy corner. There's no parks. Waluga Park is probably 3/4 mile away. That's your closest park. It's a long walk.
We have one more question here from Councilor Mans.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sebastian. Thank you for coming in and joining us.
Sure, thank you.
Hey, I have one simple question, and it's my last year on the council, or I have a year and a half left. Why are you making this offer, if I may ask? What is motivating you to make the offer?
Thank you for asking. We are the people, Jeff Schroep, who is my chief operations officer, and I, we're the ones that put that property together for Washington Federal. We were going to build a bank there for Washington Federal. We bought all the properties from the little old ladies and put it all together. And for Washington Federal, we were their consultants to build their office building. Then they had an offer from the city to buy it as for staging. So we were in the process of building office buildings there anyway, and we always thought we would be able to expand our commercial holdings there. 20-some years ago, when I came to the city, the planner, Tracy Morgan, he's a great guy, he just said, hey, the West Grove Design District is going to be a hot place to be. It might be where you want to go.
Only took 20 years, right?
20 years, yeah, but it's almost done.
Yes.
Yeah, it's looking good.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Sebastian.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your generosity
Sure.
in answering that.
Okay,
Thank you.
no more questions. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to move to more virtual testimony. And first up, we have Helen Tricky Bradley. And Ms. Linder will bring her into the room here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, this is not Helen. Helen had to step out and pick up one of our kids from rowing.
Oh, what is your name?
My name is Gary Bradley. I'm also scheduled to speak in opposition.
Okay, yes, we see you here. Okay, please, Mr. Bradley, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yes, as I said, I'm Gary Bradley. I live at 5211 West Sunset Drive. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard tonight. I'm opposed to the zoning changes being considered. West Sunset Drive is the neighborhood street that will be most directly impacted by the proposed zoning changes. It is a very small, narrow neighborhood street lined with single-family residences. Our property is approximately 150 feet from the site being considered for the zoning change, and there are 3 other single-family residences that are even closer to the site than we are. I've emailed 2 letters to the City Council in advance of tonight's meeting outlining my concerns and the concerns of our neighbors. Rather than read what you've probably already read and repeat the same objections that we've been making since this first went to the Planning Commission, I would just like to ask 2 things before you cast your vote tonight. The first is, please, each of you, go to West Sunset Drive and drive down it from Boones Ferry Road to Bon Air Avenue. It is just 1 block, and you'll see firsthand just how narrow it is and that it really is a single-family residential neighborhood that would be impacted. The Planning Commission would have you believe otherwise. In fact, the pictures that Mr. Siegel showed at the beginning of the meeting here of the Sunset Crossing buildings, if you're thinking that's what West Sunset looks like, it's extremely misleading. It really is single-family residences. That's just one development at the very end of the street. The second thing I would ask is please view the Planning Commission meeting